Okay, welcome to another video in my series on the TVR Vixen. In another video I've talked about the Series 3 model in general. I'm now going to talk about this particular car, which hasn't really been seen in public for quite a few years now, probably 15 years. So I'm determined to get it finished and bring it out. Probably not to compete with it anymore, but as I'm rather too fond of it and don't wish to subject it to any more stress. But anyway, this is a Series 3 Vixen, or TVR or Vixen S3, whichever you want to call it. It was first registered in 1971. Prior to me having it, it had 7 previous owners. So in those days, the cars would change hands fairly rapidly. People would buy one, they would realise that it wasn't for them, it was too much hard work, and they would sell it probably for, let's say, £1,500, £2,000, something like that. So I saw this car in 1989 in a front garden in Hove in East Sussex. It belonged to a guy called Sean Barry, and at the time I didn't know anything about TVR, but I had recently got rid of a Mark II Escort. At the time I'd had a Harrier, Ford Escort Harrier, which was a nice car and it drove well, and I had a spare engine for it. And I discovered, I think I saw the ad for this car in a local paper, and I was just intrigued by what it was, so I actually walked round to Hove, had a look at it, and really found it quite an intriguing car. It was in nowhere near as good a shape as it is now. The paintwork was absolutely appalling. The sunroof was ripped. The seats were ripped. It was a right mess, but it did have an MOT certificate, so it was at least drivable in a fashion, to a fashion. So I paid Sean, I think it was about £2,000 for the car. It wasn't any more than that, and we're talking 2001. And the engine, it did have a working engine and it would drive, and it had an MOT certificate. But the engine smoked horribly. It had the original 4-speed gearbox. So the car was pretty original, but it had suffered from lack of maintenance. And fairly early on, I contacted the TVR Car Club and eventually made contact with a chap who lived in Kent called Colin Ward. And Colin Ward was extremely helpful to me. I spent hours and hours on the phone asking Colin what to do, how to fix things, how to rebuild stuff, where parts came from. Because this information was very difficult to get hold of, and people weren't willing to tell you. If you spoke to the suppliers, they would tell you that some parts were only fitted to TVR and they didn't come from a donor vehicle. As it turns out, some of this information wasn't quite accurate. So I set about learning about the car, how to get it running properly, and to cut a long story short, I was able to start competing in the car in motorsport events. So in another video I'm going to talk about the competition history of the car. But I got it running, bits fell off left, right and centre. For example, drive shafts broke. But this is mainly a consequence of uprating the engine. So one of the first things I did was to replace the engine because it was smoking not in good condition with the engine from my Escort. Now this engine had twin 45 Delortos on it, so and it had a fairly hot Kent 254 cam, special pistons, etc. And of course all of this put massive strain on the transmission and everything else. So fairly early on I broke a diff, and as some of you know, the differential is Triumph, is from a Triumph GT6, and so I went through, I think, 2 or 3 differentials before I found one that was strong enough to cope with the power. I also broke a number of gearboxes. These are the 4-speed gearboxes, and now the car's fitted with a Sierra 5-speed box, and that's completely adequate for the output of the engine. Other things that broke on a regular basis were things to do with the rear suspension. So I broke pivot bars and front uprights. Okay, that'll do for now, and I'll make another video a little bit later.